Hello and welcome to ChinnyVision. This time we're talking ZX Spectrum power supplies. In front of me I have a broken ZX Spectrum, not an uncommon sight, especially like this one, because the power circuits have failed. Not uncommon to pick up a ZX Spectrum on eBay or find one at a car boot without a power supply. The original Sinclair supplies weren't terribly reliable, and the first generation of Amstrad machines, because they didn't have time to refine the design. Alan Sugar only had a few weeks to get the Plus 2 ready in order to get it manufactured. They didn't get time to make a new power supply that would be more efficient. As you've probably seen, the black Plus 2 and the Plus 3 have a different type of power supply that has a dual 5 volt and 9 volt supply into the machine, and all the power regulation and stuff is done within the supply. But for the older Spectrums, including this Plus 2 here, it's a linear power supply, 9 volts going into the power connector, and the power connector on this one was loose, and I've fixed that. And then it goes into, and it's unplugged here, a voltage regulator, and that turns the 9 volts into 5 volts that's needed for the various chips and things on the board, and that gets quite hot, hence this huge heatsink that's common on the Grey Plus 2s and the Sinclair 128 machines. So a faulty power supply can cause a lot of damage to a Spectrum. This one I've been working on for a little while. The power connector there had gone, the transistors there and there had blown, and I've still got faults on there. I've had one memory chip blown by the supply, which is that one there, which I've replaced, and I've just identified that one there as also being faulty, getting red hot. So that one's going to have to come out at some stage as well. And as I say, this isn't uncommon because of these Sinclair supplies. They are effectively great big lumps of metal. They're linear. They're supposed to put out 9 volts, but actually if you measure them without being any load on them, it can be 14 volts sometimes. And the power should drop down once it's got a load on it. But these things are 30 years old now, and they're mechanically very simple, electronically very simple rather, but there's not a lot to them, and the wiring inside them isn't very nice. I don't have one here anymore. I did have one. I threw it away. I just didn't trust it. Even if I'd replaced the capacitors and things inside it, it's not a good design. And the problem is, the higher the voltage the machine puts out, the more this power regulator, and this is a new regulator on here because, surprise, surprise, on this Plus 2, this was putting out far more voltage than it should have been. But the more voltage coming in, the more heat this thing has to dissipate. And the thing Spectrums really hate is heat, especially the 48Ks. And although you've got that big heatsink on the Plus 2 there, you've got an original 48K like this one here. There's far less room for that heat to dissipate inside, and some of the vital chips are right next to a heatsink that goes over there. Just underneath there, so you probably can't see it through the expansion port there. In fact, this one doesn't have a heatsink in it because this one's been refurbished, so it has a modern switching power regulator instead of one of these inside it. But everyone else's is going to be the traditional way of doing it. So basically, the more voltage in, the hotter the Spectrum gets, the more chance you have of blowing it up. Now, this is a bit of a problem because the Spectrum, I've lost my pointy thing. There it is. The input on the board, and we'll just flip this round here, and hopefully this is going to pick it up. We'll zoom in a bit. That will pick it up there. Usually on most power supplies, the centre pin is positive, but on the Spectrum, for some unknown reason, Sir Clive decided that what he wanted was a negative centre pin on the power supply, which actually makes getting hold of I'm trying to hold this still here, getting hold of a supply quite difficult. Although you can buy a standard 9 volt supply, reverse the wires, and it will work. But what supply to choose? So if your Spectrum doesn't come with a power supply, or you don't trust it, and you've got a 16K, 48K, 48K plus, a 128K, or a grey Plus 2, not the black Plus 2s and Plus 3s, then in theory, you can plug any 9 volt supply into the computer, providing you reverse those pins around so that your centre pin on the power supply is negative, not positive. So I went on Amazon and ordered up a couple of power supplies that come up as some of the first results for 9-volt supplies. And in fact, this was the top result here. Let's get rid of that there. It claims 1 amp, which should just be about enough for a Spectrum 48K, probably not quite enough for a +2. It is centre positive. It's marked there as centre positive. You can see that there. And yeah, providing you move that centre so that it is negative, it should work on a Spectrum. But the thing is, this thing cost a couple of quid. So what we're going to do is do a few quick measurements and see if it's, first of all, putting out the right voltage. So let's just undo that there. So I've got a bit of flex there. I have put a circuit breaker on there just in case. Got a bit of a tangle on my cable. Plugged in. Reset that there. Right, so there's my pins there. I'm trying to work my way around this camera here. Got a multimeter. Good multimeter, absolutely vital for things like this. It's a Namcal unit. Highly recommended by Big Clive's YouTube channel. So I do recommend that channel if you're into electronics and things. Right, so can you see the display there? Just about. That should zero down. So positive pin in there. Try not. Don't know how these guys do these electronics videos. Right, so actually, do we have a reading there? We don't have a reading at the moment. So that's coming up as 9.26 volts, which it's a little bit over. I mean, there's no load on there, although it should be a regulated switch supply. That's the original Sinclair supplies are linear. There's no regulation in there at all, and it drops as the load on it increases. These should be switch mode supplies, modern ones. So actually 9.25 is a little bit high for a switch mode supply. Just trying to get that in there. Yeah, a little bit high. I wouldn't. It's not the voltage regulator in a good voltage regulator in a Spectrum won't mind that too much, but I wouldn't plug that into my Spectrum. We're going to actually open these up and see what they look like inside, because the thing is with these is, yeah, you know what's actually inside. This thing, if this thing costs £1.75, £2.75, whatever it costs to get to me from China, even though on Amazon it looked like the supply was in the UK, what's inside it? This has had to come halfway across the world for that kind of price. But when I'd ordered this, I pointed this out on Twitter, and someone said, have you seen this one on Amazon? And this one looks very similar. £1. £1. Now, if you look at this here, you'll see that actually came in the post, signed for. And that would have cost £1.64 for them to post to me, excluding the envelope. £1.64 to post that to me. This supply was £1 to buy, including postage and packaging. So I suggest the vendor for this doesn't go on The Apprentice, because they get absolutely slaughtered for doing that. Well, they've lost what, £1.70 if you count how much the £1.70, £1.80 if you count how much the envelope cost. And if I didn't have much confidence in the other one, actually they're very similar design, aren't they? Look at them. They've got different labels on them, but the backs look very similar. But you can see a slight difference there in the plug unit. Sometimes the earth pins on these things can be very yeah. It's crap. It's absolute crap. Oh God. Right, how are we going to test this? Well, it doesn't need earth, so we could... Right, jump cut. Right, it's in. Don't ask me how I did that. It was with the aid of a glue gun. Shouldn't really do that, really. Let's have a measure on what this has got coming out of it. I'm surprised it hasn't fused all the lights. I don't know if that's going to work or not. It's just... I do have 9 volts off it, 9.14. It's very difficult to get contact on this one. But I do have... .14. So, yeah, it does 9 volts. But what does it look like inside? Now, if you don't want to mess around with cheap supplies on Amazon and eBay trying to find something that actually isn't suitable at the end of the day, could be dangerous, and we're going to cut open some of those supplies in a minute, there is a solution, because you've got to find a 9 volt supply that, if you've got a plus, it really needs to do 1.5 amps output to power that cassette recorder, as well as the Spectrum and that voltage regulator that gets really hot. So the Future is 8-bit has sent me a 9 volt supply that he's sourced and is currently selling. And it is a 1.5 amp supply. Of course, the other ones, the cheapies, claim to be 1.5 amps. No, I've got the wrong one there. That one claims to be 1.5 amps. The one with the snapped off earthing pin claims to be 1.5 amps. I think that one would probably catch on fire if you tried to load it up with 1.5 amps. Perhaps we'll do that later on. But here's the Future was 8-bits power supply. Comes with interchangeable pins there. Look at that. See, that's the same kind of pressure I was putting on that other power supply earth pin. That's not coming off. It actually feels... In fact, oddly, the cheap one felt a little bit more solid at the top, but of course there was nothing at the base. But that one is not going anywhere. Comes with interchangeable plugs. So if you live in other countries, you can... there are other countries available, of course. You can still use the supply. I've got the UK one in there, and it's difficult to get off once you've got it on. So I'm going to leave it on there for now, lest you have to watch me try and struggle and get the thing off. But it comes with these other connectors. I don't know what that one is. That one's a Narnia. And this one with the funny holes in, I think that's Gallifrey, Planet of the Time Lords. So if you live in those countries or places, and you can buy one of these supplies, because it'll run from 100 volts to 240 volts, and it can supply that 1.5 milliamps that you require. So let's plug it in. I'm not worried about plugging this one into a RCD to see if it's going to blow me up or not. And here's the thing, this time we go negative pin to the middle. Can we see that there? And positive pin there. And we've got 8.98 volts, I think there, which is bang on. That's within the tolerances of what this multimeter could be incorrect by. So, I mean, essentially that is 9 volts. Bang on, we'll just confirm that there. 8.9998. Difficult for me to see the screen. So that's absolutely bang on. And the difference is with this supply compared to the cheap supplies. The cheap supplies have all the markings that you'd think are official. And this one here, let's just try and zoom in a bit on that there. There you go, look at that. See, that says CE on it, that you'd think would mean it was nice and safe. In fact, the other one, look at this for cheeky. If it picks up, got a kite mark on it, the UK British Standard kite mark. I will bet £1 million that this has never been near a British safety standard laboratory to get that kite mark. There is no way. That snapped off pin there for the earthing, I mean, it's, you know, that should not happen. Now, the Future is 8-bit is sourcing these from a reputable supplier, an importer in the UK. They are properly CE marked. You can see there on there. And it should be a good quality supply. It feels weightier and bigger, but there's also data sheets available for these supplies, because the wholesaler who Future 8-bit was buying these from has to go through all the proper certifications to get this. It's illegal to sell a power supply that hasn't been properly certified in the UK, in fact Europe, and it is a self-certification scheme. But I mean, these ones, these cheap ones, they're illegal to sell. The seller who lost money on the Amazon sale, the one with the snap pin there, actually was within the UK, because they sent it signed for within the UK. So they are breaking the law. That is illegal to sell. It's dangerous. And we're going to have a look inside, snap it open, have a look on the inside. But this one from the Future 8-bit, I've been using this with the Spectrum. I can't test it against a real Sinclair power supply, but I've spoken to people who have, and I can also say that if it's a solid 9 volts, or 8.99 volts, as it was, 8.98 rather, as it was there, then the voltage regulator is going to run cooler than a Sinclair power supply. But it should also be a much more stable supply for the Spectrum, and will give a cleaner picture on the 48Ks with the composite output. Shouldn't make much of a difference on a +2 with RGB, but on the Sinclair ones especially, you should actually get a better picture quality. So yeah, I've been using this one for a couple of weeks, and I don't want to rip it open because I want to use it again. But it's a really nice supply, and I put some details down the bottom of the page there, and I can thoroughly so far recommend that you purchase one of these for your Spectrum if you're looking for a new supply. But that's the dull bit over. Let's crack open some of these cheap ones and see just how dangerous they are. Righty-doo-dah. After much faff, I've got my Dremel. Right, now, as that mad Australian bloke says, if you can't do something or other, tear it apart. And that's what we're going to do. Right, and we are in. Let's take that out of there. First thing you can see here, it's actually not the worst one I've seen, but the live terminals there, if I can go in a bit, they're just sitting on above the board like that. There's no actual insulation between that. There should be some plastic or something in there just to protect that and stop that from happening. I just screwed that. I could have just pulled that off and unscrewed it rather than Dremel it. But hey, Dremel's more fun. Just going to snap this open a little bit more. So another jump cut. Right, and we are in properly now. All that Dremeling, and I probably could have just undone it. So, I mean, that's what you're getting for your money. Actually, this, you know what? I've seen worse. You know, it's not great. You wouldn't want to run your Spectrum on that. It's not the most worst. It's not the worst I've seen. I mean, I just don't like the fact there's no insulation on that, really. Let's have a look at the other one. So I've got the other one open, and here we go. That's what it looks like on the inside there. Its pin's still intact there. I wonder if it's got a better setup there. That's not wonderful wide. I don't know if you can see that in the light there. Focus is going to put it in. I mean, it's adequate. Coming through there. Still no shielding. I mean, there's a gap there. But, I mean, look at that. You've got... We're going close there. You might not be able to see there. There's a little, that soldering is looks like something I've soldered. Got little bits protruding out. They're not too bad, but you've still got that no protection between the board there and those wires there, no insulation. And I've potted up those capacitors there. Hang on, what's going on there? You see that? There's 2 wires coming off of there. See, I can't get that from the camera. I'm trying to look at the viewfinder and show you this. There's 2 wires coming off out of that potting compound there. What is going on here? Has this been repurposed from something else? It looks like... No, they wouldn't. Jump cut, so I can have a closer look at this. I've been staring at this power supply now for a few minutes, and I'm convinced it's been repurposed from something else. It's second hand. There's just those 2 cables coming out of there, and then what they've done is on the thinnest wire possible, taken a feed off for the actual connector that you're going to use, which is nasty cable. But that's what's inside it. Oh dear. It's utter rubbish. And look at the back here. This looks like something I've soldered. It's just absolutely dreadful. That's just been put on. At least it's holding, it's strong, but I mean, oh dear. And again, this was the slightly more expensive one. And would you plug this into your computer? I mean, it's... Goodness knows what this has come out of originally. Deary me, and that just that there when the camera catches up is just, yeah, this is a repurposed board in here. So, what's the point of me waffling on about power supplies for what feels like hours now? Well, the simple fact is that you've got to get a good quality supply for your computers. Your original supplies are now 30 years old, are unreliable to begin with, and make the spectrum too hot. And therefore, you've got to be looking at alternatives before one of the capacitors or something goes in your original supply. And you can't just go to Amazon or eBay or what have you, because you're just going to get crap. Even if some of these supplies, especially this other one here, I've seen these marketed for far more than what I paid for them as phone chargers or what have you. And it doesn't matter. They're illegal to sell. The markings on them mean absolutely nothing. It's just crap. So what you need is a power supply for a supplier you trust, that has a data sheet as well. And the one from the Future 8 was 8-bit has a data sheet. I've shown it already. I'm going to put it up on screen again. And look, if you don't want to go to Future 8-bit to get one, you can go to someone like RS. And this isn't a 9-volt supply. And I don't think RS actually sell one with the correct polarity for a Spectrum. But my Amstrad and some of my other machines run on RS supplies. This is the one I use for my lights, but also my Amstrad PPC 640, which requires 12 volts. And this thing is 2.08 amps with a 12 volts. And again, it's got a data sheet for it. It's a really good supply. You can feel it. Yeah, and that's a regulated supply. And yeah, it was nearly £20. The Future was 8 bits supply. I'll put it on the screen how much it costs. Yeah, they're far more expensive than these cheap supplies. But goodness me, these things are going to burn your house down. They're going to ruin your Spectrum or other computer. They're just rubbish. And half the time they're repurposed, recycled boards. You don't know how old the capacitors are. So you've got something like this board here that's effectively second-hand. These components, all second-hand, it's been used before. What kind of service life is it going to give you? We know it's just absolute rubbish. I mean, I'm all for recycling, but, you know, give me a blooming break. It's just rubbish. So go to a reputable supplier for whether it's a Spectrum or another machine where you can get a data sheet and you can get information about the supplier and know these power supplies have been properly tested and the markings on them actually mean something. All the little markings there, they're not just being put on for effect, they actually do mean something, and that you can actually trust the thing you're going to be plugging into your Spectrum or Amstrad or what have you. At the end of the day, a lot of you are happy to go out and pay £70 for an SD card reader for your Spectrum. So £20 about that for power supply? Come on, guys. You know, if you're going to spend all this money on other things for your Spectrum, the games and everything, invest in a decent supply. And if you do, then your Spectrum's going to be good for hopefully another 30 years.